The subversion of morality and restrictions of language by oppressive systems of power allows the acceptance of individuals and collectives to be manipulated, encouraging the audience to consider the function of paradox and inconsistencies in behavior present in the human experience. The paradoxical nature of truth is assessed in both The Crucible and 1984, inviting audiences to examine the role of acceptance as an essential component of humanity and how its absence renders the human existence as meaningless. Arthur Miller's The Crucible serves as a scathing allegory of the binary reductionism found throughout 1950s McCarthyism projected onto the setting of the Salem witch trials. Miller draws parallels between the ability of officials in both eras to manipulate language and appeal to constructed notions of truth and morality in order to perpetuate fear that allows corrupt, theocratic or political ideologies to remain in positions of power. An underlying and ever-present theme in The Crucible is the fear of outside forces, conveyed in the recurring motif of the devil corrupting the seemingly functional Puritan society of Salem, similar to the fear-mongering tactics of McCarthy to present communism as an antichrist to American society and morals. The Society of Salem is built around the moral and religious values of Puritanism, a strict form of Christianity that is founded on the ancient binary principles of good and evil, with any area of grey being deemed intolerable. This is mirrored in an excerpt of Truman's 1949 inaugural address. Communism is based on the belief that man is so weak and inadequate. Democracy is based on the conviction that man has the moral and intellectual capacity to govern himself with reason and justice. However, in both societies, man's moral and intellectual capacity is limited by systems that control morality and language, leading to weakness, which is exploited, evident when Miller states, "The necessity of the devil as a weapon, used in every age to whip man is a surrender to a particular church or church state." Miller exposes the hypocrisy and subversion of Christianity by presenting Salem as a collective who are not Christian for the love of God, but for the fear of the devil, and are persecuted by a system in which individuals who rebel are punished by a different arm of the same oppressive entity. The majority of Salemites' education is limited, with their only understanding of language and philosophical concepts being through the Bible, which in a society of moral absolutism leads to the reduction of truth into false binaries, limiting the ability of a collective to accept the possibility of fallacy within their lives. In fact, it is only individuals who are somewhat removed from the collective, such as John Proctor, that are able to identify the issues with this reductionism and embrace the human experience. In the final act, Proctor is offered a paradox: acquiesce to false claims to preserve his physical life, or face the cessation of his physical life so that his moral integrity may transcend the confines of his life and empower the collective to become liberated from its detrimental and illusory state, gaining acceptance in his own eyes and fully realizing his human potential to transform himself, transcending from the flawed system. Similarly, George Orwell explores the relationship between truth and human existence through the control of acceptance to void humanity. Orwell's novel, 1984, is a bleak political satire that seeks to explore methods that a totalitarian government can employ to undermine the human experience and control what individuals and collectives are able to accept. The party uses constant surveillance and propaganda alongside the threat of torture to create a constant state of fear and obedience. However, the most disturbing method of control is the manipulation of language in order to achieve a state of complete control over individual and collective acceptance of reality. Newspeak, the official language of Oceania, is essentially a twisted perversion of Wittgenstein's idea that the limits of my language stand for the limits of my world. The limits of my language are the limits of my mind. Orwell's characterization of Syme, an expert of Newspeak, allows understanding of how Newspeak is used to narrow the range of thought of citizens. Orthodoxy means not thinking, not needing to think. Orthodoxy is unconsciousness. This dissolves the boundary between the individual and collective, as individual thoughts and collective acceptance of morality become one. For example, the word happy presumes the opposite of sad, rendering sad unnecessary, instead relying on degrees of happiness such as unhappy plus happy, double plus unhappy. Through reducing the boundaries of language, the party is essentially reducing the ability of individuals in society to conceive any alternative to what they are told, forcing them to accept whatever the party says is absolute truth. Through the use of Newspeak, the party is able to eradicate ideas such as freedom, dissent, or individuality by simply removing them from the dictionary. Furthermore, Newspeak is able to create large enough gaps in human logic that concepts such as doublethink are able to exist. Doublethink is the ability to hold two contradictory beliefs in one's mind simultaneously and accept both of them. The recurring motif of 2 + 2 = 5 is an obvious example of doublethink. The implications of doublethink renders the significance of acceptance in the human experience as obsolete, as individuals or collectives can be told two opposing statements and accept both of them as truth. Winston, the protagonist, accepts his physical death in the first chapter when he writes in his diary. Throughout the course of the novel, Winston gains a greater sense of humanity through his relationship with Julia and the realization of the true oppression he and the collective society live under. However, when he is subsequently captured and tortured, his humanity is crushed under the psychological strain of physical and mental abuse, begging them to leave him alone and torture Julia instead. In the last lines, he had won victory over himself. He loved Big Brother. Winston is representative of both the individual and collective, paradoxically accepting self-defeat by becoming the same entity, losing any remaining shred of human existence in the process. This signifies to the audience that the loss of one's ability to meaningfully accept the truth is the loss of humanity. In conclusion, both Miller and Orwell aim to meaningfully comment on the role of language and the paradoxical nature of truth to shape a deeper appreciation of the role of acceptance in the human experience, and how an individual's inconsistency of behavior in regards to refusing to accept falsehoods despite pressure from the collectives leads to a full embrace of humanity. Furthermore, both Proctor and Winston are inspired to preserve their humanity in various degrees of success after experiencing the absence of meaningful human connection. In an age where the leader of the most powerful nation in the world is able to introduce alternative facts, understanding the importance of acceptance in these texts is more important than ever before.